Hi, my name is Kathleen Randall, and welcome to the very first episode of the Go-to-Market Lab. This is a podcast where SaaS founders learn the art of scaling and taking their go-to-market strategy through specific pivots and stages of their software business. So this concept of what is go-to-market, who's responsible for it, what does good look like with go-to-market, and why is it necessary? And so I thought today to kick off this podcast would be really great to bring on someone who I've looked up to a long time and has mentored me for a long time, who has seen this market through a bunch of different lenses and really understands what go-to market is. So without further ado, Julian Waits. Julian is a serial entrepreneur, and that's the lightest explanation I can give. He is, I would say, a serial mentor. He has an incredible network, but he's really focused on cybersecurity problems and solving them for customers. We have this joke of anybody who knows Julian as the mayor of the cybersecurity, he knows everyone. And he also, on a personal note, is very interested in increasing the diversity of the field of cybersecurity. So he's driving enterprise Americas sales and corporate development for Rapid7. He's founded a company in the past, but he's also served as CEO for multiple times. So as you can see, he's got several different lenses to bring to the table today. So Julian, always great to chat with you. Welcome to the Go-to-Market Lab.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I am overjoyed to be here with you today and really honored that I'm on your first episode here. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so just a little story to set the stage. One of the things that popped up in my mind as I was thinking about this episode, last year I was working with a company, they're $5 million, raising for Series B. They're about 3 years in existence. And so their initial thesis was when they launched the company, we're going to go after Fortune 1000 customers. They're inbound leads, though, and kind of what they could get in terms of introductions. Really, if you looked at their pipeline, was very SMB and mid-market focused. And so they kind of got to this point where it was, they're looking at the numbers, doing the math based on their average deal size being quite low double digits. It was how, we're going to need to go up market to do this. And so as we're having this conversation, that it was really a combination, Julian, of sales and marketing and product working together. But in this particular case, all the fingers were pointed to the sales guy, right? The sales leader.
As always, that's the first thing that.
Yeah. So talk to me about, Julian, I know there's different ways into why kind of this go-to-market thing comes up, but have you seen that story before? Kind of unpack that for me of what you think is kind of going on in that scenario, because I think it's quite common. Would you agree?
Yeah, it is completely common. And I would say not only have I seen the story before, I have lived that story on more than one occasion. And what you're really talking about, right, is product market fit at this point. Most of the startups I've ever worked with, Kathleen, the thesis for why they began is very different than ultimately what the company evolved to be, which means you've got to be ready for a lot of transitory components and some pivots. So often when you first start, right, you've got a really smart technical founder, maybe somebody who's more on the go-to-customer side. And I stress go-to-customer rather than go-to-market. And they get started off and they have a great idea, and you sell, the first hurdle for a startup is getting over 1 million ARR. Right. So you get over 1 million ARR and it's like, okay, we have a pretty good idea. And then to your point, it sounds like this is exactly where the company was, is they're beyond the 1 million, sub to 5 million. And now it's where are we really going to eat at in terms of being able to sell our product and position it. And this is usually where, we thought it was going to be here, but now we need to be open to it being somewhere else if we don't step on each other in the process first. And the first step is always the sales guy's fault, the sales gal's fault. So, we gave you a number, you're not making your number, and therefore you're failing. What most companies forget, especially in the go-to-market component, is, and I'm sure the driver here, like you said, is to raise money. But anybody who runs sales to make a number has failed before they began. Sales is one barometer of, do we have the right mixture? Are we going after the right people? And specifically, do we have the right product? But then it's a combination, and the earlier the company, the more a combination it is, meaning it's the CPO founder, it's of course the VP of sales, or there's a VP of marketing or VP of product. It's everybody working together and building a network of people within the ICP, that ideal customer profile that you want, or you wind up just ruminating in circles for God knows how long before you finally figure it out or get lucky and break out of it and go past the $5 million mark.
So, Julian, how would you just say if someone came up to you, a newbie, just graduated college, hey, what is go to market? Like, why is that not the same thing as sales? Like, what are all the different components of go to market?
Sales is a component of going to market, whether that sales is direct, indirect, or completely online. Go to market is much more about finding the place to sell the product and having the right product to solve the problem in the place that you want to bring it. You need to have a product. You need to know who, or at least have a thesis about who your customer is as you're moving forward with it. Through marketing and sales, and potentially even product, you need to start testing that to see if you're in the right place or not. Because a lot of times, the place where you think you should be is not the house that was designed for you. Like in the company you just mentioned, they said it was Fortune 1000 and it winds up as all SMB. Well, one answer could be maybe we really are an SMB solution. And what does it take to go to market there? But go to market again is not how do we point our sales team there? It's what's the right customer, who's the right buyer within the customer, what's the right size, and what's the right messaging that we need to have to them. All of that is designed to provide air cover for the salespeople to go down on the ground and wage a war, so to speak.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I mean, in my mind, I always describe it as this union, right? Everybody loves a good Venn diagram. It's this union of product, marketing, and sales. Who are we selling to your point? Who is that ideal customer profile? Is there a specific industry? Who is the specific buyer and the target?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Now we know who we're selling to. That means product now has a very clear vision of who they're developing the product for. And then the other piece is then how do we package that up for the sales team? And so to me, that's where marketing starts to take a heavy and what does the website say? What's the pitch deck? How are we messaging in the demo? And then who is competitive? And most importantly, how are we putting together the pricing? And then to me, there's this loop. But I'm curious if you have any stories to share, because I think the other way that this rears its head when there's a gap in kind of this fundamental understanding with the executive committee and executive leaders and go to market, in my mind, that I've experienced, I think, way too many times, is when there is like a new product launch. So let's say a new module launch, Julian, right? So you're launching a new product and sending it to existing customers. And I can't tell you as a sales leader, former sales leader, it's like, here's a data sheet. Here's a 30-minute training for your sales rep. Let's go. Why do you think that happens? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. The first question becomes, is this an adjacent sale to our ICP, or are we trying to expand the ICP? And the perfect example is in my space. Rapid7 has been very much a traditional protection oriented vulnerability management, expanded in detection and response, expanded into threat intel. And the question always comes up is, how does application security play into that? How do you begin to shift left? And a lot of companies, even our competitors, have just immediately shifted when their Salesforce and their marketing people still hadn't learned how to glance left yet. They still hadn't figured out the whole DevSecOps component. They added something on top and they're like, oh my God, why isn't this selling? It seems like it should be a great fit for our customer base. And guess what? It probably is a great fit for the customer base, but then the question becomes, who within the customer are you selling to? Because now you're not just selling to a CISO or a VP of security operations. You're now selling to the infrastructure side of the house, or, in modern environments, certainly cloud infrastructure.
Right.
And it's a different buyer. And so even the module can create tons of confusion if you're not very specific about who the buyer is inside the account that you're trying to sell to. And even though it may be the same customer, it may not be the same buyer.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And to me, that's where I think where the rubber hits a road, the way that I experienced the story that you just shared, Julian, is it's not like anybody was trying to do the wrong thing, but, from a product marketing perspective and product perspective, it's like, oh, we already have the Acme customer. Like, clearly,
right.
You to go to their side. And then the sales leader is like, hold on a second, super easy. What are we talking about here? No, it's not super easy. Getting into another buying center is not difficult. And so I think that, to kind of the point that we've been making, I think this is where there's like this discussion of, okay, are we going to do this pivot? Are we going to launch this new product? Are we maybe going to get into government? We haven't sold to government before. And to me, those three people really have to sit at that same table: product, marketing. If you have to having a product marketing team and sales, so that you can kind of take all of your independent expertise and put that together. But Julian, from your perspective, in a perfect world, who do you think should really be at the helm of really defining go-to-market strategy?
Well, the earlier stage the company, I'm going to speak like a VC now. There's only one person I would hold accountable, and it's the CEO. Meaning, especially if they're a founding CEO, you're assuming this is someone who comes in with an incredible depth for whatever market it is, whether it's niche or broad. This is somebody who I can really trust. They're an expert on this. They may not be an expert at sales. They may not be an expert at marketing, but they should at least be an expert at whatever the problem set is that the company's out to solve.
No.
I love working with early stage CEOs and early stage teams. My argument with the CEO is always, you may not be the best seller, but you better be the best person to equip that seller.
Yeah.
You better be the best person to help direct the efforts of marketing. You're kind of like the band director. You're the one helping to put it all together. You're the one orchestrating it all.
What about your thought, maybe compare and contrast maybe the pros and cons of having a product leader? So, a CTO maybe at least again be at the helm of the go-to-market piece. How do you think that shows up in a positive or maybe challenging way?
So it depends on the maturity of the CTO. Whenever I'm helping someone incubate an idea for a new startup, I usually often use the term CTO. Hey, this is a great idea, but
Oh,
you're the go-to-market person, go to sales. You definitely need to go find that technical founder, that CTO, who can help you build out on this technical vision for what it is you want to do. But I agree with you. I think there's enough of a problem here that it deserves a company to go solve it. And then what happens is it depends on if the CTO is a market-facing CTO or a technology-facing CTO.
I see. I see.
Market-facing CTOs can help direct the efforts of engineering, but at the same time, they have a big foot in the door of the customer where they're listening to the customer pain, really providing that product management component as well. The issue you run into is if you skew one way or the other, something's going to suffer. If the CTO is way too engineering focused, then you need to have somebody else in between who's communicating what the market pain is. The beauty of product management, because customers don't define products, they define features, is what are those unarticulated needs that the customer, they're telling me, but they can't really say it. But the problem is something bigger. I have to weave the story together versus the more salesy oriented CTO. I think you need somebody technical to back them up to actually be an engineering manager.
Yeah.
So just my view.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And to your point, for the listeners and CPOs and CTOs, you might start to get a little bit with their feathers ruffled. And so again, we're talking general, no one size fits all. And so to your point, the different flavors. I would agree from that characterization. What about from a marketing? I've had past situations that I've lived where at the end of the day, head of sales is saying, all right, I'm going to sell this thing. And they're staring down the face of the head of marketing saying, you suck, because I need all this information. I need messaging, I need pitch decks, et cetera. But from my perspective, the marketing person really has to be so many things, right? I think that the profession of marketing gets overlooked as to one category, but there's so many components of it. There's field marketing, there's demand gen, there is brand management, and there's also obviously strategy. From your perspective, have you seen what good looks like? Take more of a positive spin to this. What good looks like of when you've got kind of a heavy influence of a marketing leader running go to market.
All right. So I have seen what I believe good looks like. At the end of the day, let's back up and define what we think marketing is. You got the 5 Ps: product, place, price. The earlier stage the company is, what I found is the marketing executives are usually more on the creative side and much more outbound focused than they are inbound focused.
Yeah.
And then where marketing people really shine is the ones who can work by the numbers, meaning at the end of the day, what sales wants more from marketing is that air cover, pipe, and I need enablement. Help me build a pipeline, however we do it, demand gen, whatever you want to call it, website, on-site visits. Maybe we can only get leads from trade shows, whatever it is. Help me to do that and make sure I have the right messaging to get that next meeting, to get the customer interested enough or the prospect interested enough to talk to us. Because the one thing that's very interesting about this market from when I started my career 20 years ago, it was all about educating the customer on the problem and the
Oh,
solutions that could exist because there was no internet. There
yeah,
was no Gartner with 20 different things associated with it and a whole bunch of reports. It was just a list of vendors that you can have that say they do these things and you want to put them on your RFP so you can evaluate them. Now, before RFPs ever occur, the customer is way more educated than we ever will be. And
absolutely.
the marketing people who win today are the marketing people who learn how to win that battle. How do I take all of that industry knowledge in the space that I'm in and help sales quantify what's working and what's not working so we can pivot as quickly as we need to make sure we make a sharp messaging. But that usually happens over time. It's rare unless it's a startup with well-known founders who had great
Mhm.
exits over and over again when they got $1 billion to start, so they can go after the most mature, expensive talent. It's usually not where startups start, and so they usually evolve to this. And quite frankly, especially in marketing, and sales, but marketing more usually more than not. The people who you started with at the top are usually not the ones you finish with at the top. Meaning the company evolved where one person was great for getting it started, but they weren't the great person for, maybe 5 million to 20 million in revenue or whatever it is you're trying to make your target.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think we've talked a fair bit about what would good look like in terms of starting to get executed on a great go to in the early stage, right? Let's call it Series A, pre-Series B, Series B. Julian, in your experience, if we kind of keep going down the journey and let's say kind of a B, C, D stage and kind of that still hyper growth, but starting to slow down and really working on scale. They've got, kind of just I'll paint the picture of a company, maybe let's their 50 million run rate. They're maybe 20 sales reps in. How do you think that go to market and how the leadership should think about go to market? How is that different than these earlier stage companies that we're talking about?
So, earlier stage, depending on the company, at least the ones I've run, it's been like helter skelter every week. It's a war room and we're trying to figure out where we go next, especially if it's in a competitive market. Like if you've got a niche and people like it, you've got some breeding room, maybe you can slow down a little bit. But as you become bigger and you get more scale, certainly by then you probably have some competitors, even if the competitor is not to do anything, and
Yeah.
things have to become much more programmatic. What you need people who think more project oriented, who think more for the midterm to the long term, not just for what you're trying to get done this quarter. And again, that's usually talent acquisition time, hiring people from more mature companies to come in and supplement what you don't have at this stage. I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so I think what I think you're poking at is you need to start to get a bench of different sets of players, right? So maybe, you're at a point where you're, to use, let's just think of sports analogies. You're now trying to go for your three-peat of your championship. And so you're trying to build up, you got to kind of move out some players and get some fresh blood in, right? Got some people retiring. And I think that's where the shift, starts to happen that I've seen in that mid stage of growth is you start to go from, you've hired really sharp, talented, just people who are smart and motivated and can figure it out. And now you got to get some people who have been there, done that, right?
Exactly.
And bring those in. But even to that perspective, Julie, one of the questions that I get quite often is, all right, well, how am I going to get this kind of voice of the customer? And I think generally, let's just be honest, most people are going to just their perspective is going to be, this is what I've seen. There's only so much usually kind of mid stage you can hire, maybe attract talent in today's kind of war on talent of how much, you can bring in an experience. So what do you think is the best way to understand, you know, what are competitors doing? What are they offering? What really is, the market and maybe kind of talk about how important it is to really get, for lack of better words, the data, right? Kind of the mass data to kind of inform your go-to-market strategy. And how do you think about that?
So I think about it in two ways. I think about it in terms of what's the network of advisors that you're building for yourself? Well, really before this point, but certainly at this point, the companies I've been most successful with, I go right after the CISOs, even if they don't know me. Hi, my name's Julian Waits. We've never met before. I've read this that you've done. I've seen whatever you've done. I'm honestly like, well, I wish you would spend some time talking to me. I have a problem I'm trying to solve. I've seen you've talked about it before. Can we talk about it? So that's one. Two is, especially if I have venture capitalists who've invested in the company, this is where they can be very useful with helping you find a network of people who, because usually they throw stuff at you and it's useless. But now if you manage them to, I need your help to talk to people at this company, that company, and this other company to understand the competitive landscape, that would be helpful. And then, of course, and you can't look at it as the enemy, there's the Gartner and the Foresters of the world. If you're beginning to mature, it's time to cough up some budget to actually talk to some really interesting analysts. And the truth is whereas we all talk to a subset of the people who we want to sell to, they talk to all of them. And there is value in that.
Absolutely.
And of all of that. But at least what's been most successful for me is building out a network of security practitioners that would be honest with me, even when I said something stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure, Julian, that you never said anything of that caliber.
Well, thank you.
Anybody
But keep going.
listening to this and knows Julian personally, yeah, you pick up that joke there that I just threw out.
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap up this part of the segment from your perspective. So if I am newly minted Series B, I've got some cash in my pocket, Julian, and I'm working on some sort of a go-to-market pivot. I'm the CEO. These are your top, whatever, 3, 5, like must do. This is what you need to focus on first to get your go-to-market right.
All right. So the first thing I focus on is talent, meaning there's no such thing as a SaaS software company that isn't successful because of its people. If I'm freshening in it with my Series B and I know I now have to take the company to the next level to get profitable, or if that's not the goal, but to have this rapid growth, it starts with growing the talent that I have. That doesn't mean I have to lay off or fire anybody, but it does mean that I have to go manage through the organization a culture that says it's okay to hire somebody smarter than you. In fact, please hire somebody smarter than you, but you have to grow talent. The next thing that I would do is double down on sales and marketing, meaning whatever momentum I already have that got me here, depending on the cash situation, I probably need to throw more wood on that fire and start burning it a little faster. And then I'm planning for the future. I am definitely starting to look at my marketing programs and my product programs as something that is more focused on longevity and endurance than just making the number next quarter. Because the catch is always, how do I fight the quarterly drumbeat that I'm going to go through with my investors with what's the right, the right answers for investments for long term in the business and being able to balance those. But before anything else, I would start with evaluating talent and the culture to accept the talent that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that your talent, so you're going to go out, you're going to find some talented people that they're all working as one, right? That you've got a culture, all the leaders can sit in a room, can challenge each other, not be nice and kind of not smile and nod just because you don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers, but also that you can have that culture where there's really a collaboration and most importantly, kind of a common unity. So, whether you're going to do the formal OKR model or just going to have a lot of offsites and have dinners together, but really make sure everybody is on the same page.
Yeah, my rule is, so this is the one place where I guess I'll go off script a little bit, is I don't want to work with any dicks. But at the same time, nobody on the management would that way, but a culture has to be built on trust. It doesn't have to be built on liking each other. There's tons of people I've worked with in professional settings as peers where we probably couldn't have a beer with each other afterwards. But when it came to the mission that we had for the company, for our culture, and for our investors, we were professional enough to put that all on the side and do the best job we could. So culture first has to be built on trust, and then it has to be built on competence, not just as competence in what you do, but also your competence in help each other rise up. So, what kills a lot of startups and even more mature companies after they've gone through the crazy growth phase is when things become tough. You know your best friends, you know the people who are really behind you, when you really have to deal with things that become tough. I need to be able to know when I'm in this foxhole and I look around that I can trust them. They may get shot, but I
Yeah.
need to know that I can trust that they tried not to get shot and they were trying to protect me at the same time. And so it's just, to me, when you lose that in a management team, you lose everything. When you got to look over your back all the time, you're worried about what somebody else is going to say, then everything's kind of deteriorated. The culture, when I first came to Rapid 7, I used to think culture was kind of bullshit. You know, oh, culture, make your number. That's the culture. Just make your number. That's the culture here. We make our numbers. And then Christina Luconi and Corey early on, because I think I told you I didn't really have a job when I first got to Rapid 7. I was an executive in residence. So I'm just like sitting on the sidelines doing whatever Corey tells me to do, watching how the company operates.
And fired up for the listeners, Corey's the CEO.
Yeah, he's the CEO, sorry. And Christina runs our people organization. But through watching that dynamic, I learned that the axiom of culture trumps strategy every day of the week,
Yeah.
it actually is true, because when the strategy begins to fall down, if I know the people I work with, I can trust, and we're all fighting for the same thing, we'll find a way to rise above that.
Yeah.
But if you
Without
don't have that,
yeah.
if you don't have that cultural knit, and if you aren't together, then you'll just continue to fail together, and most probably not together, because people start to get fired because it's determined that the culture is deteriorated.
Yeah, it is important because I think actually when the last things I was going to plug for this episode really talking about go-to-market definitions, I think one of the most important things as a business is who is trying to find the right go-to-market strategy and they're executing this plan that they put together is to be very comfortable with failure. You're going to build it. You're going to try something 5, 10 times. It's not going to work. Great. There's no finger pointing. What did we learn? Rinse and repeat, change the strategy. Let's go again. You can really learn from that failure, but not if your team is going to be playing sides.
When you do it that way, what I've found is when I've had management team or peers that weren't cutting it, it didn't take the group to point the finger at them. Because of the way we were working on it as a team, they usually rise up and say, hey, let me raise my hand. I apologize. This is an area where I'm finding myself deficient. I'm no longer in a capacity where I can help it. We need to fix this problem as a team, because they're not worried about being fired. They're not worried about being stabbed in the back. And they have the ability to be vulnerable enough to know I'm weak here and I can't fix it. I need help. That's one of the things that's important.
100%. I'm very, very glad you brought that up. Okay, Julian, so I didn't prep you for this. So I'm going to hit you with something on the fly, but I know you're ready for it. So I'm going to do this thing called rapid fire. One of my favorite podcasters does this. I'm just going to ask you a couple of quick personal questions, not too personal, but personal questions. And you're going to tell me the answers so our listeners can kind of get to know Julian Waits over and above all of the accomplishments that you have on your professional basis. So Julian, if you got a free Friday, Saturday afternoon, what are we going to find you doing?
Spending time with the wife and the dog, and then leaving that and going to hopefully somewhere.
Race a car. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that music is in your world. So tell us just a quick summary of what music means to you and why it's important.
Yeah. Born and raised in New Orleans, former, very short period of time, Baptist minister myself, a church musician all my life, jazz performance major in college. And so for me, that's one of the things that's entwined in my psyche. If I'm having a tough problem, I can't figure out what's going on, I'm going to pull out a saxophone. I'm going to pull out some piece that I've been trying to work on for a while. And while everybody thinks I'm really practicing on that piece by Coltrane, at the same time, I'm like, man, why can't I get past this personnel issue? What is it I'm not thinking about? And both those things are occurring at the same time. So my zen happens through my music. And so I use it as the component of being able to move myself forward.
Fascinating. And I feel very deficient for giving up on piano after 2 years. So thanks. So just to kind of wrap up and summarize this, we talked about in this episode, go to market as this collaboration, ideally great cultural collaboration between your sales leader, your CEO, your product leader, your marketing leader, how that might show up differently with different types of pivots and different stages. And most importantly, being able to know when it's might be the time that you need to get some help, right? Some kind of outside help, outside perspective, et cetera. So I'm really glad thank you so much for being my first guest. And so I think you set a high bar. So I've got 2 more people joining me for the next couple of days. And so I know they're going to be really excited to follow in your footsteps here. So for our listeners, just quick reminder, if you like this podcast, make sure to add some likes and some comments. And so you'll see in the podcast under the information, my personal information, hit me up on LinkedIn, send me an email. I'd love to hear your feedback. And I would love to certainly hear your own stories and experiences around go-to-market successes as well as challenges. For the next episode, so just give you a quick teaser for the listeners here. The next episode, Julian mentioned a few times, we talked about ICP, ideal customer profile. So I'm going to have one of my dear friends, as well as one of the most amazing leaders that I say, she's going to be on Fortune, one of the most powerful women in Fortune here not too long, Emily Shipman, who's over at MasterCard running their venture organization. We're going to talk about ICPs, how to define them, what good looks like for them, unpack the ICP conversation. Thank you again, Julian. It's always so fun to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I loved it. I appreciate it.